All right, beers and buying. First episode of 2025. Hey, no, you know the drill. Let's crack these beers. What a sound, honestly.
It was worse.
Pretend like it's our first. How's the break, mate?
Yeah, good. It's always a busy time of the year, I think, having a bit of time off over Chrissy. You got that probably week and a bit where you're doing the
Don't know what
family
date
and
it
friends
is.
Yeah, you're eating too much, drinking way too much, and
No such thing.
then you chill out again for another week and a bit, and then we're back. So, what about yourself?
Mate, had the kids, obviously.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah, didn't send them to daycare that much. It was pretty full on couple of weeks, but mate, it's good to get some time with them. Judy's obviously going to school this year, which is crazy. Actually, his last day today. Shout out, Jude. Did an awesome job, big fella, and can't wait to see you in big school this year. But mate, I find it was just really good time to just step away for a bit, get the mind fresh, kind of turn the phone off for a little bit, and and just enjoy some time with some loved ones. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, no, overall it was good, mate. But look, today I thought we could do something. A little bit of fun. Talk about the current times where we are. Obviously, what is it now? We're 3/4 of the way through Jan. The kind of everyone's back on board. Solicitors, real estate agents, because that particular time at the start of the year is always a funny one. You know, banks are on skeleton staff, solicitors are off, real estates have really slowed down. So it's been really interesting, I reckon, these last week and a bit in particular. See kind of it ramp back up a little bit. How are you finding it at the moment, you think?
Yeah, I think a bit of like inquiry over the holidays, plus those people that came through in December that are now looking to really sort of action a few things. People like looking to move and also looking to sort of see if they can get a better deal, renovate. It's a pretty mixed bag at the moment of what's coming through. I think it's been good.
Actually, so I touch on that. I know we were having this discussion off air as well, but really interesting to see where those valves are ending up right. So actually just want to shed some light on what we were talking about before, because it's really interesting seeing where things were maybe the start of time last year compared to kind of where they are now.
Yeah, I think we're seeing at the moment, whether it's people, looking to refinance or pull cash out to, might be renovate, invest, something like that we're seeing some pretty generous, like automatic valuations done as well, which great for the client, speeds things up. They don't have to have someone come out and view the property as well. And we're sort of seeing that, there's a few lenders that are probably coming back a lot stronger than others as well, which is really good to know, I guess, as the more inquiry comes through and if someone's looking to move and there's a great deal out there that, again, it's just they'll be able to act quickly and get what they want without sort of too much hassle.
It's really interesting. That just made me think of something as well. And not so much time differential, but like valuation differential. I know we've kind of touched on this before, but I had a client, it was in December, unit in Fortitude Valley.
Yeah.
Actually got Westpac to do a full valuation on it, and it valued up at $950,000, which was probably maybe a little bit less than what we thought it would come in at. You get it. Sometimes valuers, they can be more conservative than others.
Yeah.
And then we got a valuation done through CBA, who we both know traditionally, give higher valuations than pretty much any other lender out there. They've obviously just eased up on how much risk they've got in that space, and I'm sure they've got the data to back it up. But, the valuation came in at 1.1 mil, which is, we're talking about 150 grand. So for this particular client, we went from, at this point in time, we were able to pull out maybe about 50 grand worth of cash. And, now it's, it's north of 150 essentially is what they can pull out as cash, which means they can actually get in the market right away. So for them, they kind of look at that. I think even with what's really interesting, and this is always, I guess it's opportunity cost. But for them, when we looked at it, the interest rate was marginally higher from switching from Westpac to CBA. But, they could see the benefit in doing that, which, you don't always necessarily advise. Usually you're moving because you're trying to get a cheaper interest rate. But in this instance, they looked at it and went, well, you know what, to pay the little bit extra interest that's going to allow me to buy a property today as opposed to 12 months' time or however much longer it would take, say, a Westpac to get it to value at the same as CBAs currently, they see the value in that to go, you know what, well, it gets us into the market. You get growth in the market. It's not so much attached to, well, I'm on 595 at the moment and now I'm going to 6.2 or whatever it might have been. So
I think, you do see that a lot. And I think a lot of people, like you said, they do look at it and they're getting much better with like looking at it like overall. Like, okay, your rate might be slightly higher, but someone's looking to like renovate now. They've got someone locked in, they're wanting to do what they're wanting to do.
Yeah.
People will sort of pay for that. And I mean, if there's a lender that's going to accommodate what they're looking to do, and it may be, invest in something like, they're getting cash, they're going to invest in a business or there's
probably a big
another
one
opportunity,
at the moment, isn't it?
They'll take that because it's not, and I think that's the thing that we always like speak about. It's not, I mean, you need to find a bank that's going to accommodate what you're looking to do, and it's not always about the lowest rate because I think if you're always searching for that, if you have those
pigeonhole yourself.
Well, if you have those 5 opportunities come up, you're only going to be able to maybe take 2 of them. So, and that's why, I think people are becoming a bit more sort of switched on with that. They'll go and see a broker so that they can do all that in the background. Research.
How big is the difference, but in particular, which I think we've really both noticed recently, with the investment properties, like in terms of disparity between borrowing capacities for people?
Yeah, that's a big one. We were speaking about that this morning where we're looking at the borrowing capacities, across some banks, and there's massive differences, and that's, down to, some have really sharp rates at the moment. Some are
buffers.
The buffers, your negative gearing benefits and things like that. So, you might be great client of Bank A. Yeah. You're ahead in your repayments and, you can borrow 600,000 with them for an investment property and you could, you've got the equity there, you pull that out, you could be borrowing, upwards of like 850 with others. And we're not talking about even lenders that, have really high rates either. So people, getting a bit more, we're sort of saying that we can help more people out in terms of like the investment stuff as well, which is, I feel like it's really ramped up over the last little while as well. We started to notice those rates and the offerings as well.
Yep. Now, one thing I did want to bring up, I hope you don't mind me jumping on my phone, but a couple of key points that I wanted to, I just want to go on Snapchat. No, I'm joking. Couple of key points that I did want to just bring up today. Was more so based upon a couple of new things one new thing in the market, and then I wanted to talk to a little bit about where the market is seeing things, and the RBA being one of those key things that everyone wants to hear about at the moment. But I know that we've had a bit of a chat about this one, but I thought that especially because we get so many first home buyers that listen to the podcast, I thought one that we could kind of dissect and have a bit of a chat about is this Help to Buy scheme.
Yep.
Which has, for all purposes, kind of been approved, and I believe the bill has passed on it. But I'm just going to try to kind of read verbatim what's happening and what it is, and I know you know a little bit about it, but let's kind of run through it. So, essentially, how the Help to Buy scheme is going to work. The government, rather than going, say, guarantor for you like it does with the first home guarantee, they're going to do an equity contribution to you buying the property. Now, what it is kind of going to look like is they're going to be putting in 40% of equity for a new home, or 30% of equity for an existing home. Now, there's essentially going to be 40,000 spots distributed over a 4-year period, so it's going to be 10,000 spots per year. From what we can see, it looks like it's kind of going to be 2,000 per sort of state territory. And looks like it's got some similar demographics to the first home guarantee scheme whenever it comes to the purchase price in those key areas. So, if we're talking about, I know we've got a lot of Queensland listeners on here for, those major cities and parts, it's still 700,000. Now, one of the really key interesting parts of this is the income requirement. So if you're single, your income can't be more than 90,000, and at present for the scheme, it's 125. If you're buying with a partner or someone else, the combined income must be less than 120.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a pretty dramatic reduction on the first home guarantee scheme, which is 200,000.
Yeah.
So I guess how it's looks like it's going to work is the government. How it's different to the first home guarantee scheme, I should say, is the government will be putting in the capital to it as opposed to just going guarantor. So let's just use a $500,000 purchase, for instance, for an existing home. At the moment, the first home guarantee scheme, you would borrow $475,000.
Yep.
You'd come up with a 5% deposit plus your costs. Obviously, you'd make a repayment on $475,000. If we look at this help to buy scheme, the differences between it is, let's say we got something for $500,000, you would actually reduce the loan by 30%.
Yep.
So you'd be looking at what, $350?
$350.
Which then means that you've got lesser of a repayment. Now, one of the quick kickers here, or I think which is probably key within all this, it's like, okay, that's great, lesser repayment, all that sort of stuff. I think one of the kickers here is the fact that the government has that portion of ownership of the property.
Yeah.
Which means that, if you're wanting to do something to it, they need to be a part of it. I think that even includes the sale. They can veto it in certain instances. But, at some point in time, you've got to kind of almost buy them out as well, depending on what the equity position is. So you've probably got to borrow the money sooner or later. And then I think it's then deemed on what the market value of the property will be at that set point in time. So, mate, I just thought I'd get your thoughts on it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think because they've utilised this in other parts of the country as well, and obviously it's probably gone quite well. There's pros and cons to everything. I think people look at the cons being government's going to own part of your house or whatnot. There'll be some restrictions around potentially what you can do. I think in terms of if you want to do like a significant renovation, they want to make sure that their investment won't be hindered in any way, I guess.
Yeah. But even if you look at the first home guarantee scheme at the moment, you kind of need, like obviously if you borrowed a 95%, you kind of need that property growth. Like you can't really do anything with the property while it's under the scheme, right?
No. Yeah.
So I guess there's probably not too many differences between them, other than maybe that option might be available when the time comes.
Yeah.
You're just going to need their sign off on it.
And obviously, the pros, it's obviously worked quite well with the other schemes. The banks look at the government like a really, secure partner in these kinds of deals and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people, and I think probably the way they should look at it if they fall into it is, they can get into the market and get something that maybe they wouldn't have been able to get now. And so they're getting in now, partnering up basically with the government in it. And, let's say these people are first home buyers, they're young, as they get, might be career growth and things like that, and the income is going up more. They've probably found that, it would have been X amount of years before I could actually have the income to purchase this property. And then by that time, if you're looking at property growth as well, that gap just gets wider and wider. So
100%,
get in now, if they have the ability to then remove the government down the track, or they build up enough equity to move on to something else by themselves. I think I think they've obviously allowed, as you said, quite a number of spots and a good amount for Queensland. I think they'll get snapped up pretty quickly once there's some more details that come out about it and people can be confident.
And that's a good point you've raised, is like, we've got some information on it. The finer details, we don't know everything yet, which sometimes does tend to happen with these government schemes and grants and those type of things. The one thing that it does say here, Housing Australia, which obviously they form the first home guarantee scheme as well. Notes the passage of legislation by the Commonwealth Parliament on the 27th of November 2024 to establish the Help to Buy program that will be administered by Housing Australia. The Help to Buy program will commence once the program directives are in force. At this time, the program start date has not been determined. So we don't really have a start date on it at the moment. These types of things I have, we've probably noticed in the past do kind of coincide with around that financial year. So maybe it'll be around the middle of the year we start to actually get a little bit more intel into it.
Yeah, I think, it's obviously great to come up with these things. And I'm sure there's some details behind it, but until they get some people in place, which you'd sort of hope is sooner rather than later, because it is starting to be spoken about more. There wasn't much after it was announced, but I think it's better to get on the front foot so when something does come out, people can act rather than, if you drag your feet a little bit, you might might waste a bit of time there.
And that's obviously that's one thing that I think that we've all, not to pump our own tyres up too much, but I think that's one thing obviously we would love to stay on top of as a business and as a team is kind of like, well, what's happening for first home buyers? This might not necessarily suit everybody. Some people might look at it and go, well, why would you do that? So I guess the pros of it are, I find it really interesting that the earning bracket, obviously they've reduced it, in particularly for joints, pretty significantly. So I think they're targeting, that maybe they've looked at the data of who's using the first home guarantee scheme and obviously the borrowing capacities of that as well. Because I think even if you were looking to do a joint one at, 120 income, you're probably not getting up to around that kind of 700 realistically. Yeah. Once you're factoring everything in.
Yeah, which I guess, they're probably not going to go near that price cap then. That's in there. But again, I think it's good for those people again who just want to get into something and they can, as I said, as their career and income progresses and goes up, just capitalise on what they sort of did a bit earlier.
It would be good for them to wind it back, but you look at that 700 and let's say it's 120. I mean, I'd have to look at the proper numbers on it, but let's say it's 700. 30% the government owns, so what's that? 210,000. So I mean, realistically, they only need a loan for what's that? 490.
490.
So
because they're getting the stamp duty concessions as first home buyers up to 700. So
it'll be interesting to see what the deposit is. We were talking about this earlier. It'll be interesting to see if you're still needing a 5% or does that give enough security to?
Yeah, I think
be walking in with not much. You know what I mean?
I think they'll probably want to see something. And I think it might, we don't know, but...
No, yeah. What's your thoughts? What do you reckon?
I think you'd probably be a safe bet to say that they'd want to see 5%, which, 5% plus the cost you're talking about up to 700, there's not really any cost. You're talking about maybe $3,000 to $5,000, including your legals or something like that. Yep. So...
be interesting.
It'd be interesting to see, but I think if I was probably looking at that now... just with sort of what we know about what's happened in the past, I'd probably be looking at something around that mark.
Be interesting if they make it lower, right? The 98%.
Yeah.
Imagine if they do like a 2% or something like that. It'd be interesting to see what the framework is. And I'm assuming they'd be talking to lenders right now about that to figuring out, okay, how are we going to do this?
Well, I think they would have to, with their other schemes and whatnot, they'd be getting a lot of data from the banks, and I think you look at. I think they'd be heavily relying on, those bigger guys who are on the schemes at the moment, NAB, Westpac, and CBA, who do a ton of them.
That's a good point.
They would be doing the brunt of them, and knowing what you know about those guys, there'd be some pretty heavy reporting on that stuff as well, which should be getting passed up because, the people in the government only know what's basically being reported to them. And they do, whenever it came back to the previous grants that were coming out and whatnot, there was definitely communication on, how it was going to work, what was going to be most effective because, they're not really in the game or anything like that. They do need some guidance from the lenders of what'll work.
And not everyone's going to be on it, right? That's why I think it's important to not to hammer home the whole go and talk to a broker, go and talk to a broker, go and talk to a broker, but your bank just like the first home guarantee scheme, might not be on the panel of lenders, and to be honest, the bank staff might not know a lot about it, considering if they're not. So I think that's why there's power in talking to a broker, just because of the choice, the knowledge of what's happening, for first home buyers as well, because it's not pigeonholed to one bank that might not be on a scheme spot for the government's list. This stuff you might not even hear about.
Yeah, and I mean, if you speak, if you're with a bank and you go in there, which is usually most people's, used to be their first point of call.
Yeah.
But I think now with, what they're seeing out there, maybe their friends and whatnot have used a broker as well. If you go into the branch and they're not on the scheme, they're probably not going to tell you.
They're not going to talk to you about it.
They're not going to talk to you about it, and they're probably not going to rush you out the door to go and call a broker or go to another bank. Right. So it is on you as well as the client. So, and now we've had those clients as well that have come through, bought something for 700 and they've put in the 42 grand, but were told it was going to be, tens of thousands of dollars more, or they couldn't get in with a 5 because they're going to have an 8 or 9% because mortgage insurance was going to be involved. And if you don't go get that other opinion, then all of a sudden you're paying tens of thousands of dollars more. Your rate's not great when you go and borrow 95% compared to what people are getting on the scheme as well. So, and I think the way we, the time that we take with first home buyers and mapping it all out of scenario A, B, C and how it all looks, I think just sort of gives them a good quick insight into how it all works and what we do. So
I think the big thing is there, 100%. For anyone listening out there, we're going to watch this space. We're going to be updating it as soon as we've got some more information on it.
And people on the other schemes as well, all through last year and even now, there's people that are going to, providing that the schemes are still out, they're going to buy on that middle to the end of the year, but they want to sort of see where they're at now, get their ducks in a row, go away, do some saving. So I think it's important for people to at least have a bit of a tangible goal there, or know what they're working with, because and speaking to a client the other day, knowing that they're going to have to buy before June 30 or they won't qualify because of prior year earnings that need to be provided to the government, and this year they're going to eclipse that, and the current earnings aren't taken into account. So if they didn't come through and thought, we'll be right, if they came in or bought after July 1, all of a sudden, you're looking at mortgage insurance territory. So,
and that's another good point that you've made there, because for a lot of people, let's say first home buyers that want to utilise the first home guarantee scheme, make sure that you are looking or talking to a tax accountant before June 30 rolls around. Because how many people do we see
they're tight
right on that amount, and there's different ways that you can claim deductions. I'm not talking about doing anything dodgy. I'm more so saying people can contribute extra money to super. There might be some work stuff that you haven't claimed that you might have been able to claim. People that are right around that, that income threshold for the first home guarantee scheme definitely need to be planning ahead. And I know that we helped, multiple people around the middle of last year that were going, I think I'm going to be earning too much. All of a sudden they went and spoke to their accountant. Oh, wait, okay, there actually are some deductions here. All of a sudden we get the taxable income and it's just below kind of where it needs to be, which is perfect, because it's not necessarily about what you're earning, because you might be sitting there going, okay, well, me and my partner, we're grossing 210 a year or whatever it might be. Okay, we're going to miss out on it. It's always based around the taxable income. So what's the tax office actually state your taxable income is on your notices of assessment?
Yeah.
And that's based upon your gross income minus any deductions that you've got within
especially
within your tax
vehicle
return.
expenses and that kind of thing. We see a lot of people that might be in trades and things like that, and that's a huge deduction, especially if you're sort of driving around all year. So I think it's important to, as I said, just come and have a chat, plan ahead, because towards the end of the year as well, people, it might be end of financial year bonuses and things like that, and if you don't take that into account, you're going to wipe yourself out. So it can be a matter of buying, when you've got a month or two to run on your lease. Financially, it's actually better for you to, I'm sure you'll get someone in for the lease, but to buy sooner
Yeah.
than miss out completely.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. All right. This is, I don't know how long we're going to talk for on this one. This is going to be really interesting, actually. The RBA interest rates,
Yep.
the big discussion, everything that the big thing that everyone wants to talk about at the moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, what are we? We're 3/4 of the way through Jan at the moment. We're about 2 weeks out from the first RBA announcement of the year. Really interesting. There was obviously when the new governor came in, there were then going to be changes implemented as to how many times they met. They obviously used to do the first Tuesday of every month was the RBA meeting, which means we actually got 11 a year. They always took Jan off, of course, which is, I guess, fair enough. They've now changed it so the RBA is meeting 8 times a year, kind of a little bit of a different, sporadically different than what it previously was. And it was going to be a meeting over 2 days where they were going to talk on a whole heap of factors. So, look, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in Feb. But I did want to just read something out to you really quickly. So this is what the big 4 banks are predicting as of this month. Obviously, they're always subject to change, but this is off CanStar, which is a
Super
reliable source. Obviously, it's pulling the information from what the economists are saying at these big 4 banks. But I'll give you. So we've got 2 stating that there's going to be a cut in Feb, and then we've got 2 stating that they think it's going to start in May. Now, the 2 stating that it's going to start in Feb are CBA and ANZ, and then we've got NAB and Westpac that's stating that the first cut's going to happen in May. What's really interesting is the number of cuts in which they've kind of forecasted between now and probably likely next year. Is NAB stating that they think there's going to be 5 cuts between now and into 2026. CBA and Westpac are both stating that there's going to be 4, and then ANZ only have 2 on there, which I find really interesting.
2, yeah.
Couple of things, I guess, probably that we want to talk about here, but probably first and foremost is what's your thoughts? Obviously, no one's got a look into the future necessarily, but what's your kind of thoughts on what you think's going to happen come a couple of weeks' time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's so many opinions out there, and you look at all the banks, economists or whatnot, and they will change their mind on the drop of a hat as well.
Yes.
Like because of the, there's obviously a number of factors in terms of like what data they're looking at, and then
employment's obviously probably the one of the big ones, right? And obviously the underlying inflation.
Yeah. So, and I think some economists will look at certain data and think that's going to sway it a bit more.
Yeah.
It's hard to sort of predict, but you'd sort of hope that if it's not going to be in Feb, that it is going to be in May.
Yeah.
It's probably good now having a few like less decisions, because it sort of gives, like let's say they do a rate cut, and hopefully it's all passed on, so people it's all realised, but sort of seeing what effect it actually has. I think I remember like a couple of years ago there was 11 or 12 in a row or something like that.
Crazy.
And it was rapid,
Month after month.
It was rapid fire every month, and it probably whether it needed to come down a bit or not, but like it just caused a lot of panic and chaos in the market, really. And a lot of people held off what they were looking to do. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I think maybe between now and the next 12 months, you'd hope that, there's at least a few cuts and people are getting some relief. And that'll, hopefully mean that, people getting into the market. So, people that wait, if you want to wait for those few cuts, you'll be able to borrow more, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's also going to mean that some people, as you're holding off to buy, some people will hold off to sell because they know there'll be more money in the market.
Yeah.
So that's why at times, we talk about do what you need to do at the time, not, because if you're trying to predict the market, you're going to be, you might be sitting around forever.
And you're not going to, like, for a lot of people out there, I think if you're playing property on the short game, you're probably investing in the wrong thing.
Yeah.
If you're playing the long game, and you're not going to be forced to sell and you want to get into the market, like as we've always seen traditionally, property's just gone up and up and up.
And I think especially too, like obviously when it comes down to an investment, it's, it's A and B equals C for a lot of people. Like as you know, you'd probably
Yep.
expect with investment. But when it comes to the owner occupier stuff, you know, we always have those conversations with people that like you're going to actually live there. You need to do something that you're happy with, and
Yep.
if that means that something comes up tomorrow and you're prepared to buy,
Yep.
you know, then if you're happy to, then go and do it. Don't try and wait and hope for that unicorn, because you know, if that's what you're doing, you're not going to be the first in line when it comes. And if someone then has been looking for, you know, we have those clients that look for over 6 months, sometimes 9 months. If they get to that property when you're there and they've been looking for that long and they're frustrated, they will pay more than you because they want to be done with it. So,
and it's not to say, I think I tend to agree with you there. I just think that with the market being where it is, I do still think it's too active.
Especially in Southeast Queensland, like
I just don't think you're going to get a bargain. You've got to meet kind of where the real price is. I think that there's enough people floating around that are looking to buy a property at the moment. And I think with that thought process of going, well, you know what, if I hold off, you know, I don't want to hold off another 6 months. It seems pretty obvious that there's some rate cuts coming. You know, everything being even. You know, like you said, borrowing capacity goes up. More than likely, then demand. There's going to be more people looking to borrow money. There's going to be more confidence in the market. I mean, think about how much confidence we saw in the market just from holds. When we had those couple of holds, when people were thinking, oh, maybe they're going to go up, and we got some holds, all of a sudden the rush, it was just kind of like, okay, cool, let's buy a property again.
People thought they could actually start to plan and actually do some things. And I think, you know, if you hold off now because you want your repayment to be a bit lower, but then that property goes up, and then in the short term you're paying a bit more in stamps. I think people need to look at it as an overall, lay it out and sort of assess where they're at as well. And I think, you know, if rates can come down, and that'll give some relief as well to, you know, hopefully some investors that you'll probably see, you know, hopefully for people that are in the rental market and they're trying to save at the moment, but over the last 3 years, they've probably found that their rent's gone up 60, 70%, you know, bit of relief for them as well while they try and save and transition into purchasing as well.
Now here's the data. Once again, I'm just talking about the RBA here, but here's the data, right, for repayments. So, you know, and the assumption here is that they're kind of working on these cuts to be 0.25%, right? Mm-hmm. You know, so NAB, they're saying it's going to go down 1.25%, you know, between May and into 2026. The mortgage repayment drop on this would be $441 a month. The 4 from CBA and Westpac, they're expecting, obviously, CBA is saying Feb, Westpac saying May, but the 4 drops that they're talking about is about $360 a month in lesser mortgage repayments, and then ANZ's 2 drops between, you know, Feb and into 2026. They're saying it's about 182.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess that's interesting in itself, seeing, you know, how much those drops would then go on and affect and change what you're paying.
And some people, they'll say, you know, I need to get the borrowing capacity up to get a bit more of what I want, and, you know, that's completely fine. But also, like, you know, if you're looking at, you know, first home buyers or people that are moving on from their first home, using that equity to purchase again, you know, we're sort of seeing in that market of, let's say, 600 grand, you know, might be. And that's units,
interesting you say that. Interesting you say that. That's sorry, just to put some more info on that. That's based on a $600,000 loan over 25-year period, those rate drops.
But in that market of, so first home buyers through to probably your first and second home buyer, you know, in that 600 to even, let's call it like the 1.2 range or something like that, that's still really competitive as well. Like when people have used that growth going on to the next one. Mm-hmm. So people that, you know, are maybe waiting around a bit, you don't want to, you know, especially if you're already at that sort of top end of your budget, if you're going to wait too long, you're going to have to really relook at what you're buying, and that may be the place that you're buying or the area.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to, if you're not going to act swiftly, do that.
Awesome. Mate, that's pretty much it on the RBA and obviously the Help to Buy. kind of just wrapping things up. So I think my thought is I think that it's going to be interesting because obviously, not to say that US politics gets too involved with what's happening, but I think some people were maybe expecting there to be a cut at the end of last year. Obviously, Trump got into power, which I think changed maybe the thought process potentially. He's now in power. So, yeah, I think that there's obviously it's going to probably be more based around what the data says. But my feel is I think there probably will be a cut in Feb. I do think that the RBA will still take a cautious approach to kind of how they look at these things, given that they won't want to just go down, 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 and then all of a sudden have to go back the other way. I just don't feel like that's going to be helpful for anyone.
Yeah.
So I think they'll take a pretty easy approach. My prediction is I think I reckon there's going to be 3 cuts. 3 cuts this year.
If there's 3 cuts in this calendar year, I think that would obviously provide a lot of relief for people that maybe are already on a mortgage that are feeling the pinch a bit over the last sort of couple of years, but also, put even more confidence back into it because obviously we know, Brisbane to Gold Coast, where like a lot of our clients are, there has been some decent confidence throughout, even like those worst times. But I think, when you look at it nationally and overall where some other markets have slowed a bit, putting that bit more confidence back in, and then fingers crossed that the cuts that come out are fully passed on by the banks as well, because I think it's a time where, I don't know, people may be just a bit more aware, a bit more alert. They probably want to make sure that, for their own public standing, and we've seen that in the past as well, where some haven't and some have, and that's really put some banks at the top of the pile because they'll quickly report on who hasn't. So So it'll be interesting. But 3 cuts this calendar year would be.
What are you going for?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'll say that there'll be a few as well.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. 3 cuts this year.
Go to Sportsbet and bet on. No, don't do that. I think it'll be really interesting. But again, I think if people are sort of thinking, okay, well, I'm going to buy in a few months, come and have a chat, get prepared, and then sort of know where you stand. So when the time comes, like getting a pre-approval in place and that kind of thing is super quick, and you need to be able to act quick as well.
And that's good point. Almost forgot about that. Beers and buying. The event will obviously look to launch another one. Don't know if we're going to go. We might then again look to do one in Brizzy, one in GC. Usually we like to do Brizzy in the start of the year. Gold Coast kind of towards the end of the year. Obviously we'll love to run another one of those. Obviously the interest is always high, but I definitely see some benefit in us, running one of those together again. The early part of 2025, which we're in, because I do think that getting all your ducks in a row, making sure that you understand what your borrowing capacity is, and just looking at those numbers, like doesn't matter where you are in your walk of life. Like if you've got the savings or you don't, it's just a really great spot to start because it just lets you understand kind of what do things look like for you. How much do you need to save? How much can you borrow? Just gives you something tangible to work towards, which I think's a big benefit.
And you've had some clients as well that came to one, a couple of years ago that, like now they're buying. So people, and maybe it would have been even longer if they didn't come or didn't chat to you or whatnot. So I think it's, again, just reinforcing that if people are armed with a bit more knowledge and what they can do, and they'll feel more confident as well than going through the process as well.
So anyone listening out there that is keen on the beers and buying, we'll get cracking on it and get some stuff together and hopefully get an event announcement in the near future. But Hainesy, thank you as always. Appreciate your time.
Easy.
Thank you for being on another episode and enjoy, mate.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.